blast off and the clock has started.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Relationships Through the Looking Glass. This is episode 8. So we are going to be talking today about a term that I am really not familiar with in an intimate way. Vulnerability. So I am ecstatic to have one of my favorite podcasters back to join us to talk about this term and what it means when you're talking about relationships and kind of give a male's perspective of what that looks like. And that's Mr. Blackovation. And I'm going to hand the mic over to him so he can tell us about his podcast, why he does what he does, and why vulnerability is a term that's kind of important when you're talking about building relationships. And then I'll go ahead and let Nicole jump on in because she's pretty much going to be steering this boat today. So Daryl, you want to go ahead and let us know what you feel about the term vulnerability and tell us about what you do and why you do what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daryl. I do go by Mr. Blackovation. It is Mr. Blackovation. Basically, it's 3 words put together. It means inspiration, innovation, and motivation, all packaged in a black frame. So what I do is I'm a podcaster, and the name of my podcast is called the All Things Black Podcast. You can pick that up on any streaming platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whichever one you like to, listen to podcasts on. And basically what I do is that I help tell Black stories and life experiences through the art of podcasting and visual media. I've actually had some pretty interesting guests come on the podcast to, share their expertise and just have a really good, general conversation. And I'm here and happy to be on your show once again, Michelle. I think you have phenomenal topics. I did hear your last 2 topics, and they were absolutely on point and great. So I'm here today to talk about vulnerability, which is what the topic is, and I'm going to try my best to answer those questions, with authenticity and and stuff like that. So I'm very happy to be here.
Well, we're ecstatic to have you here, and when we're talking about vulnerability, like I said, I am not really a strong person in that realm. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Nicole so she can kind of tell us what vulnerability is in her definition and why it's so important to talk about today as we look at how we build relationships with one another. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Nicole.
So, hi, my name is Nicole, and I'm an emotional intelligence coach. What I really enjoy doing is actually helping people with their self-awareness, with their vulnerability, which allows them to have much more richer experiences in any relationship that they have, whether it be professional or personal. So I am actually intrigued and love the idea of vulnerability. And once I started actually truly embracing vulnerability in my day-to-day life, just the relationships between my family members, my friends, my work environment just became so much more richer. And I truly believe that once we embrace vulnerability, we are going to become much more rich. The relationships are better. Hold on just a second. Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, vulnerability to me is that moment when you are needing to move forward, needing to progress, but you're unsure about what the result is. So it's that hesitation moment. And once you truly embrace that hesitation moment of like, applying for a job, or the last example I used with Michelle was jumping off a diving board, and you don't know what the result is going to be on the other side. Can you hear me? It just got really quiet.
No, I'm just processing what you're saying.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay.
I'm just like, that doesn't sound fun at all.
Okay, so
I'm not
okay,
liking it.
perfect. So that's why it's so important, because you don't know what's on the other side. And truly what's on the other side is growth, is movement from point A to point B. That's why I think it's so important for us to embrace vulnerability, because you can keep yourself held back by, I know what this safe space feels like, and I'm not going to venture out, which venturing out is the bridge that needs to be crossed in order to make some type of movement. So yes, you can stay in that safe space of, I know what's going to happen, I know what this is, but then you're closing off any ability for growth. So that's why I feel like vulnerability is very important, especially for us as an injured community, us meaning Black people. As an injured community, I feel like we all want to stay in this safe space, and being vulnerable for some reason is viewed as a weakness and not as courage, as strength.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we need to change the perspective of vulnerability and allow each other, whether it be male to male, male to female, female to male, to actually embrace that space of vulnerability, so we can progress and realize that we all, in essence, are wanting the same thing and need to take steps towards the same thing. And it is okay to show courage / vulnerability so we can move forward.
Wow, that was a lot.
I'm sorry.
That was a lot. And no, I'm just saying, like, wow, I'm really behind the power curve or learning curve when it comes to that term. Because before I go into my spill about what I think it is, I'm going to let Daryl go first so I can judge. And then I'll add mine. But
No.
Daryl, why don't you let us know what you think vulnerability is?
I think she literally summed it up the best. I don't think that I have anything that can
That
follow
is
that
such a
up to
cop
be
out. That
totally.
is such a cop out, sir.
No, it's not. No, no, seriously. Seriously, I think she really summed it up, though. I do believe that there needs to be a level of vulnerability in our community so that we can start the healing process, especially male to female. I really think that needs to take place. And I think that once that is accomplished, or once we start to, take that seriously and begin to really, really process what somebody is actually saying, I think we'll be in a lot better place. I was having a conversation with my nephew earlier. We haven't talked in a while, and we were really, really in that space of being vulnerable, with each other, because there was some misunderstandings and stuff like that as he was growing up, and I was a little bit older, and he just wanted a lot of clarification on some things. So I was like, okay, well, let me go ahead and, drop that. Now, with that being said, I think male to male vulnerability is quite common, to be totally honest, more common than people would think. It's male to female vulnerability that gets a little, it seems like it's a little problematic. And I think for a lot of us as men, it does present a problem for us, because I'll say this much, when a woman does find a man that can be vulnerable with her, you should really, really cherish that, because it's not often that you find a man that will be that open to you about some of the things that has happened to him, or some of his desires or failures and stuff like that. So I think as a woman, you should really cherish that, because again, that's not easy to come by as a man. But it's something that definitely needs to take place, and like tomorrow, to be totally honest, so we can fix some of the stuff that's going on in our community. But yeah, I think she was dead on in light of what it is and how she described it, and I guess I'll rest there.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense. I definitely agree with the gender differences. Like, I do see it much easier for females to be vulnerable with other females they trust, but the fallback or the challenges is when you're looking at it within building intimate relationships. And for me, like, I never even thought of the term vulnerability as a thing, like until I met Nicole. Like, I grew up in a military household. I was in the military. Vulnerability is a bad word. Like, it has a negative connotation. And to me, vulnerability always equates to weakness. And it's like, If you're vulnerable, you're weak. And that's always what I thought of it as. And so I'm probably representing some people who are listening and saying, yeah, that's what I would think of it as too. Because if someone says, Michelle, what's your definition of vulnerable? I'm just going to have to pull out the dictionary and be like, well, it's susceptible or physical or emotional attack of harm. You know, being vulnerable is something that you could potentially get hurt. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, we need to be vulnerable with one another.
No.
Go ahead.
I agree with you when you're looking at it from a security standpoint or a defensive standpoint, because again, you're coming from it from a military aspect. You know, you were in the military, so no, you don't want to have any vulnerable spots because the enemy can come in and do some pretty destructive things. So I do understand that part of it. But when you're in a relationship where you're, you know, in constant communication with someone, I think vulnerability has more of a strong point than it would have anything to do with negativity. Because think about it, when you're resting in your vulnerability with your partner, right? And I'm talking male or female. When you're resting in vulnerability with your partner, that person can, to a degree, shore up or cover you in that space. If I'm saying that right, they can cover you in that space because they know where you're lacking at. So
Right.
you become a covering for that individual, vice versa, male to female, female to male, that kind of stuff. So you can shore up a person in that way, and that actually builds up a better defense. You know, because you know how do they say it? You're only as strongest as the weakest link in the chain.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
you got to discover the vulnerable points in order to shore them up. So, but I totally understand where you're coming from when you look at it from a security aspect or a military defense aspect. So I agree with that as well.
And it's scary. And I guess even saying that while you were talking, I'm like, well, Michelle, you really shouldn't be thinking of your partner as the enemy. And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother discussion. But yeah, if I'm thinking of this individual as the enemy, I would be nervous, or I would be like, I don't know if I want to show this person this side of me because I don't know how this person's going to use it. And it comes into the fact of, you know, you look at past situations and people being vulnerable with the wrong person, and you can have disastrous results when that
Yes.
happens.
Yes.
So how do you, what's the, and I'm gonna bring Nicole back in here because she's like the vulnerability cheerleader. So how do we look at keeping yourself safe as you learn your partner? Because in the beginning, and I want to highlight what Daryl said in the previous podcast he was with, on people telling all their story or telling too much up front to create a bond, and that's not what's occurring, right? Daryl, remember when you said that?
Oh
When
yeah. In the beginning stages of it, hell no.
Yeah, so how do you slow that part down for people who are listening who might do that, who think, oh, I'm going to be vulnerable up front, but you're telling too much information, and Daryl's kind of like, no, that's too much. So where is the middle ground? You know what I'm saying? And Nicole, I'm gonna bring you back in the conversation with that. Like, where is the middle ground with being too vulnerable too soon? And then you have individuals like me who are like, ah, you have to earn my energy, my story, my vulnerability. I can talk to anybody, um, but there's so many layers to my interaction. By the time you get to my core, like, you've gone through a whole bunch of little mini tests. You don't know you're doing it, but you are, just because I'm so protective of who I am at the core. So allowing myself to be vulnerable to let somebody access that takes a lot. So I need to bring you back to kind of explain to myself and Daryl and the listeners, like, why is it, what is the middle ground here? What's the middle ground for keeping yourself safe as you allow space to be vulnerable?
Okay, so one, I do agree with the military aspect regarding not allowing vulnerable areas. Where we, women, men, as a culture, need to change it is, one, we need to do the healing from the past relationships. And not move forward in new relationships until we do, because that's where the baggage comes in, and that's where the fear of being vulnerable comes in. That's one. Then two, when moving forward into another situation, we want our I think you're doing it right. You do want to test the person with with information. Like, okay, we're going on a date to quote unquote get to know each other. I will allow you to know that I enjoy seafood. Okay. So what does this partner do with that information? Do they, enjoy it? Do they take me out to a seafood place? Did I share information and this person is, you know, holding on to that information and being safe with it? So testing the person with bits of vulnerability is perfect. I think the end goal is to genuinely be seen by your partner. And if you are holding yourself in a non-vulnerable space, you're not allowing yourself to be seen. So this is metaphorically, but when you go to meet somebody, you're not going to meet them naked. You're going to meet them fully clothed, and then you're going to have conversations, safe conversations, to allow the person to get to know you. And then eventually, that person will get to see who you truly are by bits of information being shared. I think last time Daryl was saying that women basically share too much too soon. And I think that's where the vulnerability gets dangerous with people that are not trustworthy.
Right. And then also people, and I use this example, but kind of hinting to my issues, right? Well, what about you think you've trusted the right person, and then you get down to the like, okay, I'm about to be like 100, and now you're like, oh, this person's actually the bad guy. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
What does that mean? Like, how do you retract vulnerability there? Like, you're already exposed. And that's for both of y'all. Like, you're already exposed. What do you do with that?
For me, you would take it as a learning experience. Like take apart, what did I learn from
Can I get any more learning experiences, Nicole?
I know, but in this learning comes growth. So yes, it is painful, but there is growth, and you're becoming stronger through these lessons. And to move past those lessons and know that you are much more, you deserve more. You deserve somebody that you can trust to be vulnerable with, not the person that's going to violate your trust or violate your vulnerability. The lesson is, okay, this type of person or these traits from these types of people didn't allow me to feel safe, so I'm not going to allow myself to be in these types of situations anymore. Or at least be open and saying, in the next situation, that to me, a lot of people are not aware of what vulnerability is. And so when you kind of call it out in frame definitions in a new relationship, like vulnerability for me is this. I do feel like I'm being vulnerable in this moment. It gives both people the opportunity to get on the same page of these definitions of these words in your specific relationship. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Daryl. I need a masculine overview, because men, from my experience, I'm not broad stroking here. Whoa, with the paintbrush. Men see vulnerability differently, right? You all, I don't know. I know for me, like I said, before Nicole came into my life, I thought vulnerability was a weakness, and many men I've run into have had that same viewpoint. And I know the example you gave me was, when a man is vulnerable with you and shares a story or shares his pain with you, that means something. I have dudes sharing pain with me all the time and still drag me. So I need you to make it make sense. So how do I
got you. I got you. Well, I think at that point, and I don't know the the real background of the situation, but maybe those guys were not really looking for, even though they were vulnerable, maybe they weren't looking for something that was, really tangible, something that was, long lasting or whatever. Maybe they were just looking for somebody that they can spew on, which is what a lot of us do. A lot of times.
Are using me for medicine, right? Using me to make
more than likely.
Right.
And I hate to say that may have been the case, but it, there's a possibility that could have happened. When you look at it male to male, when you're talking about vulnerability male to male, yeah, I mean, we would take that as some form of weakness, because as men, we project strength, right? So when you see a male that may not have that projection about himself, we'll look at it and say, okay, well that's a weak man, he's not standing at a certain stance, or he's not, kind of vocal. He's not doing the things that I perceived as men to do. So yeah, we'll take that as some type of vulnerability, and we think we can actually take advantage of a man like that. But when it's vulnerability towards a woman, look, man, I want to be able to rest in my woman. You understand what I'm saying? I want to feel just the same way she wants to feel safe around me. I want to feel safe around her. So if I can confide in her with something, I want to know that she's not going to share that with Sally, Susan, Samantha, and the rest of them. You know what I'm saying? I want to know that. So that allows me to become vulnerable with my mate, with my woman, right? That I know that I can go with her. A lot of times want to talk about, well, my husband is my best friend or my wife is my best friend. Well, how do you think that they got to that point?
Right.
How do you think they got there? So they had to share a level of vulnerability in order for them to get there, right? Because everything is not, rose-colored glasses and things like that. You're going to have some very up and down situations, and sometimes you just got to be open enough to share what your feelings are, what your thought process was, and things like that. And then when the smoke clears, you say, I can see a little bit better from that person's perspective because they shared with me something that they may have been holding on to in that moment, right? Because the worst thing that you can get is when a man actually shuts down and doesn't say anything to you. That's the worst thing you can get. When that man shuts down and doesn't want to say anything at all, well, you just set yourself up. So I think at one point you do want your man to be a little vulnerable with you and tell you what he's thinking and what he's feeling, right? Because that man knows at that point he can confide in you, he can rest in you the same way that you want to be able to rest in your man. So that's a covering for the both of you. Like I said earlier, that's a covering. And then, to land it, to go back to what you were talking about, what I said in the first podcast that we did about, saying stuff too early and too often in a relationship in the beginning. That's exactly what I meant. In the beginning, there is a tendency for some people, I've experienced this when I was in the dating world. I've experienced it. You'll get some women that just think that they're being honest and they end up sharing all kinds of stuff. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. First of all, I'm not your girlfriend. So you can say that to your girlfriend, but if I'm a potential date or a potential mate, why are you sharing that with me? I'm looking at you funny now, right? And I don't have to know all of that information. So yes, she was absolutely right when you say it sounded kind of like fishing. So you put out bits of information to see how they're going to handle that information. You just don't share everything. You put out bits of information, see how they'll handle it, right? And you got to be very strategic with it. Bits of information, see how they handle it. And if they mishandle that information, why would you share more after that?
Right. And I agree with the whole wanting to feel safe. Like that's the whole premise of a relationship, at least in my experiences. When I've identified somebody, I need to know I'm safe with them so I can be vulnerable. But like the question I'm about to throw out, has the term had different meanings for you over the years? For me, it has. Like when I was younger, vulnerability just was not a thing I was interested in. It was more of somebody's always out to get something from you, right? Relationships are transactional and someone's always out to get something from you. So you have to have your armor on, your guard up until you find somebody who's trustworthy enough. But then I just never looked at it as, but I want to be vulnerable with you. It was more of, can I trust you? So it was just kind of looking at it because it had a different connotation. And now when I talk to people, especially me being in the therapeutic profession and doing therapy a lot, we are types of individuals who don't really have a lot of rocks. We're a rock for everybody, but there's very few people I can identify to say, I trust you enough where I can put down my stress, my struggles, my fears, and just let somebody else allow me to rest. And now I understand that's what vulnerability is. It's for me having to learn that being vulnerable is being with somebody that you're not afraid they're going to take this and use it against you, but they're going to, like you said, they'll cover you and provide safety so you can rest in that. So I think I'm growing up
to that real quick.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna be kind of blunt.
I'm scared.
Mo- most of that, and I'm not talking about you, per se, but when we have that type of thought process, of course, that's because we have been taken advantage of, and then we've also been put under what I call nigger thinking. See, that's nigger thinking, to be totally honest. Because we've been taught to be very predatory towards one another. We've been taught to be very, savage towards one another. So when you come up in that space, the first thing we're thinking about is, well, damn, I'm wondering if, little John gonna do something to me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's very, it's nigga thinking. But when you come out
Do
of
you
that
think
type
that's
of
a
mindset,
societal thing, though? Do you think that is something that has been pushed within the society that we live in? Like, because that's what we see so often in our culture, that we just bring it in everything that we do.
yeah. I mean, it is a form of conditioning. That we all go through. It's definitely a form of conditioning. It's social engineering. You know what I'm saying? We're seeing every time you look at Black people specifically, because that's my love. I love us, even though we can act a fool some damn time. But it is social engineering. So every time you see us, you see the worst of us instead of actually seeing the best of us.
Right.
So we think this constantly, and this is something that is constantly bombarded in our subconsciousness. So the first thing we think, and even though they haven't done anything to you, we'll go into a neighborhood where there's a lot of Black people, or a gas station where there's a lot of Black people. And the first thing we're thinking is, oh Lord, what's going to happen? But it is a conditioning that we go under all the time, and we just got to find a way to work our way out of that type of mindset or that type of thinking. But yeah, I call that nigga thinking.
That's awesome, because that's the first time I've heard it described that way. And it also allows us to look at, so here's a question for that then. Do you feel our community has a bigger challenge around being vulnerable with one another then? If we're looking at what you so eloquently termed as
Want me to say it? Nigga thinking.
Thank you. How do we get around that when we are trying to build safe environments between one another in relationships? How do we get around that?
First thing is education. That's the first thing, education. So quick story, and I'll move. I'll get out of the way because I see we got somebody else here. But quick story for me, growing up, I remember being about 16 years old and being exposed to some very great information. I used to listen to, and I had to get up and go to school the next day. And at one point, after I started listening to this stuff, I didn't give a damn about school. But I would listen to a broadcast out of Chicago, WGCI radio, with this gentleman by the name of Bob Law. And he started to actually talk about a lot of stuff that I had no knowledge of. And what it did was it gave me an awareness about myself and started to make me feel a little bit better about myself, because I think that's the biggest thing. We don't have a self-awareness in our community that elevates our mind to make us think a lot better about ourselves. And then with the constant inundation of, the things that they portray us as, you look at the television screen, you have a sapphire type of image, with a lot of Black women, or you have the bully coon image with a lot of Black men. In other words, I'm gonna beat the hell out of you in my own community. So you got to start divorcing yourself from these images and these programs and start to feed your mind other things and about your history, about your people, that will actually feed your mind and your spirit and make you look at your people a lot different from where you're at now. So it's an education piece for me. It's really about education. And I think that is happening, but not as fast as it should be happening, because we have to fight against a larger machine, and that machine is the media.
Right.
So when we consume that media, and if you look at statistics, Black people consume a lot of media. We have huge TVs in our homes. We have big radios in our homes. So we're consuming a lot of media, but the kind of media that we consume is not an educating type of media, right? It's all about entertainment. It's all about, making us feel a certain type of way. And that imagery actually is very negative towards us. And when we constantly feed on that on a daily basis, then you get what you get, because form follows function.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And that was That was a lot. And Nicole, kind of to pull you in on the conversation as well, especially with the new knowledge and information that Daryl just gave us. With that being said, the additional challenges that our community has with the term vulnerability, Daryl's saying educate yourself. Do you have any additional aspects or tools or suggestions on how we get around that fear of vulnerability? Because it can be a scary concept for a lot of people, myself included. And I'm just learning that it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's actually a necessary thing when you're talking about a healthy relationship. But Daryl brought a lot of amazing points into this conversation. How to specifically our community get around what has been programmed in us for so long?
I think that our community used to, back in Africa, think of the community as a we, and then somehow, some way, which we'll leave that there, got turned into thinking individualistically. So about the individual. If we can transition to going back to thinking of things as a we, like we are doing this, we are moving in this direction, we are blah, 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 then we can actually move, create amazing things together for our culture. Part of that is some of our leadership has proven to not be trustworthy. And I think we need we need to see, which is part of being vulnerable, the real people that we're dealing with without any secrets or ulterior motives or individualistic thinking. We need to being vulnerable allows us to trust this person in front of us. And so I think a lot of times we have these leaders who present one thing and then they have something else going on because, either society has, these ulterior motives, or they have their individualistic thinking that they want to achieve. So for me, I think if we can create education for one, to educate the culture that we are valued, we are important, and show each other that we appreciate each other. And then we can start being vulnerable to say, like, I really appreciate what you said, and we don't have a problem big upping or what do you call it, giving props to other people that look like us and, buying black or doing whatever we can to support the culture. I don't think that would be a problem. Right now, one, in order for vulnerability to happen, a safe space needs to be created. And right now we just don't have that because either we're looking through situations through our own wounding and not doing our own healing, or two, once we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, it proves to be a non-safe situation. So now it's like the hurt keeps going back and forth and we're passing this trauma injury to each other, as opposed to like stopping, healing our own, and then moving forward to heal others, or encouraging others to do their own healing, so we all can have a safe space to be vulnerable and to share and to improve together.
Right. And all that made perfect sense. And I like the fact that you gave the example of the two lenses and how you experience your world, and your experience is going to have a definite impact on how you're going to be when it comes to being vulnerable, or allowing someone to know you and experience you in a safe space. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to relationship building, safety is paramount, right? It's if I don't feel safe, you're going to tell, because I'm going to step back into masculine type of energy. And we hear that so many times from males, from men, sorry, Daryl, that she's too masculine. She's too masculine. Nah, nah, nah. But here's the deal. We don't want to be. We don't want to be masculine. We want to be vulnerable and be able to be soft and all the stuff that people think of with feminine energy. But if we're in a space that we don't feel safe, then we're going to have that armor up, because it's protection of that femininity. And like for me, I've worked so hard at that very special part of me. I'm going to protect it. I'm going to protect it. So if I feel a threat, I'm not going to be like, hey, here's my underbelly. Here's all my secrets, and just hope you don't use it against me. So it's such a complex question, right? So we're talking about, what are some ways people can get comfortable with vulnerability? Daryl said education. Nicole said do the work to heal, looking at things differently. I think my answer would be kind of a mix. You have to educate yourself on yourself. You have to know yourself. So you know where your blind spots are, where your fears are, where all these areas are that can cause you to not feel safe with somebody. But then not just assume everybody that you meet is a potential mate, because they're not. And I have worked with so many people where they'll jump from one relationship to another just because they don't want to be alone. But what they're doing is just building up, I don't want to use the word karma, they're just building up all of these experiences that don't work out, right? And now you have a whole distorted view of what relationships are. So I would say, again, what Daryl said, educate yourself. What Nicole said, heal. But for me also, get to know who you are. Like, who are you? And a lot of people have problems answering that. They answer with a title, or they answer with who they are to other people. They very seldom answer who they are at their core, because they haven't done the work to find out. So definitely all of those make perfect sense to me. And it kind of leads us into the next question of how does vulnerability look in healthy relationships? So I'm gonna throw it back to Daryl so he won't take any of Nicole's answers. So when you're looking at a healthy relationship, what are some behaviors? What does that look like? If you could kind of just give us an image of vulnerability in that.
So I would probably say that would be one of the most purest examples of vulnerability. If you have that in a relationship, I think it would be peace. Great interaction between the two individuals, cooperation, between the two individuals. So you lessen the bumps that will come along, and you lessen the problems that will come along if there is a level of vulnerability that is there in the relationship. Sometimes we do have a tendency to hide certain things, from our mate for whatever reason that we do it. But then when a serious situation comes along and the thing that you hid kind of aligns with the situation that came along with the circumstance, it only intensifies the situation because you hid that, again, for whatever reason. And it might have been something that could have been, worked out or talked out. And there was really no need to actually hide it. But yeah, that's kind of what I would say what it would look like if I were to see like an example of it. You would actually see, there would be a form of bliss, there would be a form of peace, camaraderie, just being able to navigate that space and lessen the bumps in the road when they do come.
And kind of just to kind of go and unpackage what you said a few minutes ago about not sharing that with your mate, right? Something that you don't share with your mate. Wouldn't that signify if you are with somebody that you don't feel comfortable, that you don't feel safe enough to have those conversations? Would you say that could be identifying another issue that's going on?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Let me put it to you like this. Have you ever noticed children that if they're going to do something bad, and we all have this in us, if they're going to do something bad, they go off somewhere else and they do it. They don't never do it in front of you. Like we all have an inherent thing in us that says we know if we're doing something wrong or we're doing something right.
I, sir, am an angel. Okay.
All right. You got your wings. I'm not. go right ahead.
I'm joking.
I'm not challenging it, but it may be one of those things that not necessarily has anything to do with the safe space. It may be due to the decision that you're going to make that is only pertaining to you and not the both of you. Like that's when that thing comes in where you say, well, I'm individualistic at this point and I'm not looking at the team. I made a unilateral decision to do something on my own right? And then I know how my mate is going to react if I did that thing. So it's not necessarily saying that that a safe space is not there. It's just that you have unilaterally made a decision without
Daryl,
consulting with your other mate that could be
Daryl,
problematic, which is one of the reasons why you probably hit it.
Daryl.
Yes, ma'am.
That's Daryl. So what you're saying is, what I'm hearing is,
My Cash App is open.
So you're saying I'm making a decision on my own, but I know it's gonna piss you off, so I'm gonna be quiet about it and hide it. So technically, it's not just a you decision because it's gonna impact the team. If we're together as a team, and I'm like, if I go do this, Daryl's gonna be pissed, so let me go hide it. That's a team decision, though, even though it's indirectly something that's going to impact you. I'm not telling you about it, but I know I'm in the wrong because I'm hiding it. You know what I'm saying? Am I off?
That's an individual decision.
But it's impacting us as a couple.
It is
right?
impacting us as a couple, but that is an individual situation.
So wouldn't that tell me that if I'm doing something that I know is going to hurt them,
it's
not
still not saying that that's a safe space. It's still not saying that it's because it's a safe space. It's because you know that you are doing something that is inappropriate. It's accountability.
I need that's all. Give me an example of what that is. Because cheating can be like, I know this is going to piss her off if I go and smash this chick, so let me go hide it. But that's impacting the couple.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily thinking about cheating, but let's just say, we say something about spending money that we make a conscious decision that we're going to talk about how we spend our money, and then somebody goes and spend the money and didn't tell anybody what they spent it on or when they spent it or anything like that. So you just kind of hide it away. So yes, it's going to impact the couple, but at the same time, that was an individual decision.
Right. Okay. I can see that. So in your answer, being a healthy vulnerability in the relationship provides safety to where I can go tell you, you know what, Daryl, I work for this money. I know we talked about it, but this is my money and I'm going to spend it. Is that kind of like, I feel safe enough to have that conversation with you?
You should be able to feel safe enough to have that conversation, whether or not So the thing about it is that if we're going to be in a relationship, there has to be agreement first and foremost. We got to have agreement. That's the first thing. If there's no agreement, there's no relationship. Ooh. No agreement, no relationship.
Okay.
So in that, yes, we should be vulnerable enough to talk about that type of thing. So yes, if you feel like, okay, well, I've made a certain amount of money and I feel like I want to go ahead and and spend that. But again, we have a collective budget. We have a collective pool that we're pulling from, right? And if we do a certain thing that's going to impact the unit or the team, then yeah, I mean, that's something I think that you should think about. But here's the thing, like Sister said earlier, talking about individualism. There's hyper individualism. Like sometimes people can even be in a relationship and still be so separate from everything, which at that point, that doesn't say that you're in a relationship. You're just cohabiting with somebody.
I feel attacked right now.
that just means, hey, it happens. That just means you're really cohabitating with somebody. You're not in a relationship. You're just cohabitating with somebody. You're there to pay bills and whatnot, but you're not really trying to build anything. Which a lot of times, which is why a lot of relationships end up falling because, I'm doing me, you do you, right? That's not a full-on relationship. That has nothing to do with being in a relationship. Full-on relationship is when both of you can communicate and argue in a way that is not going to be traumatic to the relationship. Talking about the thing. Let me put it this way. I've dated women, and women. The women I've dated have always felt like they have to know what's going on, right? That makes them feel secure. They have to know what's going on. Well, don't you think the same thing is with a man, like we would want to know what the hell is going on too, because if I'm in a space where I'm here to try to protect you and try to provide for you, right? I think I have a right to know what's going on. So I don't think you should be able to go out and just make, a decision that's going to affect us, even though you feel like that's the best decision for you. But we're in this together. So at that point, when you do that, then you're an individual. You're not in a relationship. So therefore, then if you do that, then there should be some consequences, behind that. There should be something that lets you know that maybe that wasn't the best decision to make as an individual.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I'm gonna pull Nicole in. The same question, Nicole. For you, what does vulnerability look like in relationships? And I'm pretty sure, like, you can probably copy off of Daryl's paper because he gave us a whole lot. Do you have any additional elements that, to you, what it would look like if you saw a couple and they got it right? They're doing it right. What would that look like for you or to you?
For me, it goes back to the safety and communication. From the beginning, to be able to say, I have feelings for you. I like you. I'd like to move forward in this relationship. I'd like to get to know you more. Those types of things are like signs of vulnerability. And then when they both get on the same page, the communication just flows easy and they trust each other and they communicate openly. There's no, hidden agendas or, secrets or ways to strategically share information. There's no, what do you call it, like backstory. There's no behind the scenes. Their relationship is their relationship and they're completely open and honest with each other. That's what I would see in a relationship that encompasses vulnerability.
Awesome. And I think for me, when I feel that a couple's getting it right, and I know I might have come across as negative, and that's not the intent. I just like to play devil's advocate as well. But I have seen couples who get it right. And I mean, I've even been in a connection where it was right. Other things weren't, but that part was. So, yeah, it's just being able to, just some examples, some behaviors, right? Come home, you had a crap day, and I know he has my back. I know I can sit down, tell him everything, and he's going to listen and be receptive. I know that when he's having an off day, he can come to me, and I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there at 100%. I'm going to get off the phone. I'm going to turn the phone off, put my computer aside, and just be available, be present. And that's something a lot of people don't get it. Like, being present is not just being in the same room. Sharing space with somebody is not just being co-located. You know what I'm saying? It's, I'm here to hear what you have to say. I don't care how scary it is. I don't care how concerning it is. That's what I'm here for. If I'm your partner, if I'm your life mate, that is one of the things I'm signing up to do, right? But also be there when he wakes up with a nightmare, and he's able to talk to you about it. Be there when he got pulled over by the cops today and he's carrying that heavy burden with him. He needs to have somebody to download that information to and knows that he's not going to be judged. Be there when this man sheds a tear for whatever reason and knows I'm not looking at him as a weak person, but some of the strongest individuals I know who says you are safe enough for me to do this in front of, right? So that's what, to me, vulnerability looks like when we get it right. Now, is that the only thing in a healthy relationship? No, there's other things you have to have in a relationship for it to be healthy. But vulnerability, to me, now that I have done my growth and learning, that's a foundational piece. There's other things you need, but if you're not vulnerable with your mate, then what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm with somebody I don't feel safe with, maybe I shouldn't be with that person. Because what I've heard from both of you is the word safety. And there has to be an element of safety in you feeling safe with this individual before you can do the vulnerability, right? So as we go to wrap this up, is there any particular last thing you would want to leave with the listeners about people who might be struggling? Because like I said, everybody's not going to hear the term vulnerability and say, yeah, I want some of that. So if you were talking to somebody who's a holdout, somebody who's like, oh, vulnerability, that's weak, blah, blah, blah. What is something that you would say to them to get them to look at it differently? So I'm going to start with Daryl, and then I'll finish it out with Nicole.
Therapy.
You can't just throw that out and stop. He said therapy and he's gone.
You know,
Boom.
that's it.
It's just straight therapy, deuces.
I mean, what else needs to be said? Because listen, I'm not going to do that dance with you back and forth if you feel like that the the vulnerability piece is something that you just can't get with. I'm not going to dance with you. I'm really not. I mean, I think at that point, I think you should reach in your pocket, find your checkbook, your credit card, your debit card, or whatever, and seek some services. That's an internal thing. And I think sometimes we spend too much time, trying to have a conversation with people that are already blocked. When somebody is blocked, that's a hard thing to actually try to get somebody from being, and that takes a lot when somebody is blocked. There's people in my family like that right now, and they are blocked. I'm talking about they are so blocked that they can go back and remember when they were 2 years old and tell you everything that somebody did negatively to them.
Wow.
They're blocked. Not to say that it didn't happen, but it's a piece that they're holding on to, right? And whatever you say to them, they're not relinquishing anything. That like, I'm standing by this is where I'm at. This is my safe space. I'm not doing it. So I think at that point, you need to reach out to somebody, and you need to reach out to a professional. Those are safe environments, and then go and have that conversation with those people. That's what I think. That therapy is the number one thing. Go and do that, and just begin to self-reflect, and and here's the thing too, and I'll end on this one. The idea of perfection is an illusion.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It is an illusion. So when people believe that there's nothing wrong with them, I run from them people.
Right.
I get away from them, because we all have faults and frailties, and we all have things that we struggle with. And when somebody tells me that there's nothing wrong with them, oh no, deuces, I'm out. I'm not dealing with you.
Have you met somebody? Have you ever met people like that?
Yes.
Wow, that is crazy. And they were serious?
Serious as a heart attack.
Holy smokes, that's crazy. Yeah, I would run too. Like, all right, you got some issues. So therapy, and I agree. As as a mental health person, I push that all the time. And therapy, as the very last podcast we did about mental health, it's not as scary as some people make it out to be. Finding what works for you is key. Therapy is not a cookie cutter experience. You got to find what works for you, and then you got to be consistent. Sometimes therapy is having a really good friend who calls you out on your stuff, like Nicole does for me. so lovingly. Michelle, you're in the wrong with that. Okay.
With love.
So yeah, I know it's exhausting. but throwing it back to you, Nicole, like if somebody was listening right now and still saying, you know what, I'm not gonna be vulnerable with so and so because like I've been hurt before and I'm not gonna let it happen again, what would you say?
Okay. So when I agree, therapy is definitely a step towards vulnerability as well as self-awareness. Vulnerability is that moment in a relationship or in a situation where you're questioning, like, oh, I don't know if I should do this or I should do that. In that moment, question yourself, like, okay, I am questioning being vulnerable in this moment. Is it something that person did that doesn't allow me to be vulnerable, or is it my past scars that's not allowing me to be vulnerable? And in that moment of self-reflection, I think that's where you can see, like, ooh, either more work needs to be done on myself, or this person has, you can properly evaluate the other person's behaviors, words, etc., to say they have provided me a safe environment to move forward with vulnerability and sharing. I'm going to move forward and be vulnerable. So I think it's a self-reflection in that moment of vulnerability, one, and then two, also practicing vulnerability in your day-to-day life. Not saying I'm going to go out and be vulnerable, but in moments of like at work when, you're feeling anxious about a project, you can be open and say, hey guys, I'm feeling anxious about this project because of blah, 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 as opposed to like, yeah, I got it. I know how to do everything and I'm stone face. Be vulnerable. I'm nervous about this, but blah, blah, blah. And that allows the people to kind of see you, and you in essence are practicing being vulnerable. So the more practice that you get being vulnerable, you can recognize the moment of vulnerability, assess in that moment, and then move forward or not.
That's absolutely perfect. And I'm copying off of both you and Daryl's papers today, because therapy, absolutely. And like, I'm not going to keep harping on it, but it is super important. And whatever that looks like for you, the key is making sure it's progressing. Like therapy isn't therapy if it's not helping. You can say you're going to talk to a therapist all day, but if there's no forward progression, it's not therapy. It's not working. And then what Nicole said about taking opportunities to be vulnerable in different areas of your life. And that's what really helped for me, because I was especially when work's concerned. I have an addiction to work. I'm very upfront about that. And just because I learned recently, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I've always been the person who is the go-to for everything. Well, Michelle can do it. And my answer is always, I got it. I got you. I got it. I got you. I got it. No matter what I was feeling internally, the key is somebody came to me because they trust me on my opinion or my abilities. I'm going to do it because I can, and ignore the fact that I might not be too sure about this. I have so much on my plate right now. I really can't give this the attention I need. And having that vulnerable conversation out of fear of letting somebody else down. So knowing yourself and what you can and cannot do is also key. If you can't be fully present and available for somebody, don't allow them to share themselves with you if you know you can't receive them. There has to be some self-accountability as well. When you want somebody to be vulnerable with you, are you able to receive somebody's vulnerability? And that's something that we have to ask ourselves as well. So as we wrap up this episode, I'm going to pass Daryl the mic so he can let everyone know where to find him and what amazing things he has coming up and how to get all involved in that. So Daryl, go ahead and let everybody know.
Hey, thank you again. But yeah, this has been a really nice conversation. I've learned a lot just listening, and I'm gonna put a lot of it in my to-go bag and pull it out when needed, and study it myself. Try to incorporate a lot of these things that that's been said today in my day-to-day living. But my name is Daryl. Like I said earlier in the podcast, it's Mr. Blackovation, and I host and run the All Things Black podcast. You can pick that up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, just about all the streaming platforms. And like I said, I typically, or my goal is to help tell Black stories and life experiences through the art of podcasting. So predominantly my guests are Black, and I just want to try my best to try to provide a safe space for them to come on and talk about the things that they are interested in, or maybe some products or services that they have. But yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. And a project that I do have coming up is my podcast audio training, which will be my first time doing anything like that on Zoom or whatever application I'm going to use. But it's really about trying to help people to get better audio quality into their podcast. So that's what I got coming up. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that personally, but I know other podcasters will be as well, because a lot of it comes, the authentic experience of listening to spoken word has a lot to do with how clear the sound is. So I'm ecstatic and I can't wait for that to happen. And Nicole, why don't you go ahead and let everyone know how they can get in contact with you and what they can learn from you.
Okay, hello everybody again. I truly can see the value in vulnerability and how it enriches the relationships and communications and life in general. And so that is one of the areas that I want to help with men and women, but I can recognize that there is a need when it comes to men and tapping into vulnerability and being safe in vulnerability. So that's kind of where my focus has been. You can, of course, find me on the Looking Glass, Instagram, and on the podcast. So it's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you both for being so transparent and vulnerable. Being vulnerable with us today. See what I did there? I really love the conversation. I did learn a lot about this term that used to be a bad word for me, but I'm cool with it now. You know, I'm not going to wear a shirt that's screaming vulnerability, but I know it's important. And I think, you know, the programming and everything that we talked about does have a large piece in how this term is viewed. But I think a lot of people are doing it. They're just calling it something else.
Yes.
They might not just be calling it vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
They might be saying, you know, I got you. Or, you know, when they check in with somebody, how are you doing today? And that person feels safe enough to share. That's being vulnerable, guys. So if you are doing that, you're on the right track. So that's a good thing. So absolutely keep us on your subscribed list. Keep checking us out. We have much more content coming down the pipe. You can find us on Instagram at Through the Looking Glass Podcast, on YouTube, Relationships Through the Looking Glass, and check out our playlist. Everybody knows I'm a huge music fan, so the Rabbit Hole playlist, which is on Apple Music and Spotify, and basically the songs on there are attached to the topics that we discuss. So just another way you guys can connect with us in that realm as well. So again, thank you, Daryl, Mr. Blackovation, and Nicole for participating today. And you guys take care. And I look
Thank you.
Soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you're looking for more of us or to check out some additional content, make sure you visit our Instagram at The Looking Glass Podcast or visit our YouTube at Relationships Through the Looking Glass. And if you like tunes and music, we also have playlists set up on Apple Music and Spotify under the Rabbit Hole playlist. Take care, be well, speak with you soon.